Children should be innocent, but some harbor darkness beyond comprehension. In Atlanta, 2023, a mother's life was stolen not by a hardened criminal, but by a 15-year-old girl who smiled as she plunged the knife. This is the story of Tiana Jackson, whose final moments revealed how deadly the face of youth can truly be. Welcome to Silent Crime Witness, where we bring you the darkest true crime stories. If you're new here, hit subscribe and join our growing community of truth seekers. The morning of March 17, 2023 began like any other in the Jackson household. Tiana Jackson, 24, woke at 5:30 a.m., careful not to disturb her sleeping 3-year-old son, Jamal. The small 2-bedroom apartment they shared in the Westview neighborhood of Atlanta was modest but meticulously kept. Photos of Jamal lined the walls, his first steps, his second birthday, the two of them at the Atlanta Zoo last summer. Tiana had been a single mother since Jamal was 6 months old, when his father, Deshaun Morris, was sentenced to 8 years for armed robbery. Despite the challenges, friends and family described Tiana as relentlessly optimistic. She never complained, recalled her mother, Denise Jackson, in a tearful interview. Even when she was exhausted from working double shifts, she'd come home and read to Jamal, help him with his little puzzles. She'd say, "Mama, I'm tired now so he won't have to be tired later." Tiana had been working as a nursing assistant at Grady Memorial Hospital for nearly 3 years, while simultaneously taking night classes at Atlanta Community College. Her dream was to become a registered nurse, a goal she was just 18 months from achieving. Her supervisor, nurse manager Patricia Coleman, would later testify that Tiana was the kind of healthcare worker you pray walks into your hospital, compassionate, detail-oriented, and genuinely invested in every patient's recovery. That Thursday morning, Tiana, dressed in her blue scrubs, packed Jamal's dinosaur lunchbox with his favorite peanut butter sandwich cut into stars, and drove him to her mother's house on the east side of the city. Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera shows Tiana kissing Jamal goodbye at 6:42 a.m. It would be the last time he would see his mother alive. Tiana's shift at Grady Memorial began at 7:30 a.m. Hospital records show she clocked in at 7:22, early as usual. The day was busy but routine, changing bedding, assisting with medications, helping elderly patients to the bathroom. Her colleague, nurse technician Shanice Williams, remembered chatting with Tiana during their lunch break. She was excited because she'd just gotten her tax refund, Shanice recalled. She was planning to put most of it in savings for Jamal's college fund, but she was going to splurge a little too. She wanted to take Jamal to the aquarium that weekend, maybe buy him some new shoes. He was growing so fast. Tiana's shift ended at 6:30 p.m. Security cameras captured her leaving the hospital at 6:42 p.m., phone in hand. Cell phone records would later show she texted her mother, "Heading to the store, then coming to get my baby. Tell him mommy's bringing ice cream." It was a promise she would never fulfill. At 7:15 p.m., Tiana's white 2018 Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot of Westside Market on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, about 3 miles from her apartment. The store's extensive security system provided investigators with crucial footage of what happened next. Tiana entered the store at 7:17 p.m. Store cameras show her selecting items methodically: apples, bread, milk, chicken breasts, and as promised, a small container of chocolate ice cream. She chatted briefly with the cashier, a middle-aged woman named Gloria Ramirez, who had known Tiana since she was a teenager. She was in good spirits, Ramirez later told police. She showed me a picture of Jamal on her phone, told me he was starting preschool in the fall. She was so proud of that boy. What Tiana couldn't have known was that outside in the parking lot, 3 teenagers had been watching the store entrance for nearly an hour. Keisha Williams, 15, Darnell Tucker, 16, and Latoya Bennett, 15, had arrived at the shopping center around 6:30 p.m. Security footage shows them loitering near the entrance, occasionally checking their phones, seemingly evaluating customers as they entered and exited. The 3 teens attended Westlake High School, about 4 miles from the market. None had serious prior criminal records. Darnell had been caught shoplifting 6 months earlier but was released with a warning, The girls had no documented offenses. All three came from what appeared to be stable, middle-class homes. Keisha's father was a postal worker, her mother a dental hygienist. Darnell lived with his grandmother, a retired schoolteacher. LaToya's parents owned a small landscaping business. There were no obvious red flags. Detective Marcus Reynolds would later explain at a press conference. These weren't kids from broken homes or gang affiliations. They weren't on our radar. That's what makes this case so disturbing. What investigators would eventually piece together, through cell phone records and social media accounts, was that the three had been fascinated with true crime content online. Their group chat, recovered from LaToya's phone, revealed weeks of conversations about famous murders, serial killers, and how they might commit the perfect crime. What began as macabre fascination had evolved into something far more sinister. At 7:28 p.m., Tiana exited the store with 2 bags of groceries. Security footage shows her walking to her car, keys in hand. The 3 teenagers, who had been sitting on a bench near the store entrance, stood up when she passed. Keisha nodded slightly to the others, a signal that would later be scrutinized by prosecutors and behavioral analysts. As Tiana loaded her groceries into the trunk of her Honda, Keisha approached her, phone in hand. From the camera angle, it appears she was asking for directions. This was confirmed by Keisha's later confession. I asked her how to get to Cascade Road. I knew where it was. I just needed her to look at me instead of behind her. While Tiana was distracted, Darnell and LaToya moved in from behind. What happened next was captured in horrifying detail by the store's exterior cameras. Keisha Williams pulled a kitchen knife from her jacket pocket, a 7-inch blade stolen from her mother's cutlery set. Without hesitation, she stabbed Tiana in the abdomen. The medical examiner would later determine that this first strike punctured Tiana's liver. As Tiana doubled over in shock and pain, Keisha stabbed her again, this time in the chest, piercing her left lung. Tiana collapsed against her car, clutching her wounds as blood rapidly soaked through her scrubs. The teenagers grabbed her purse and car keys from where they had fallen. But instead of immediately fleeing, they lingered. Store manager Raymond Davis, who was taking out trash at the rear of the building, heard Tiana's screams and rushed to the scene. His testimony would later prove crucial to the prosecution's case. The girl with the knife was just standing there, watching Ms. Jackson bleed. Davis testified, his voice breaking. She was smiling. I'll never forget that smile. Not laughing, not excited, just satisfied. Like someone who'd just finished a good meal. Davis shouted at the teens, who then jumped into Tiana's Honda and sped away. He immediately called 911 while attempting to help Tiana, using his jacket to apply pressure to her wounds. She was conscious when I reached her, Davis recalled. She kept saying, my son, my son. She asked me to call her mother. I tried to keep her talking, told her help was coming. She said, tell Jamal mommy loves him. Those were her last words. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes, but Tiana had lost too much blood. She was pronounced dead at 8:03 p.m. at Grady Memorial Hospital, the very place where she had spent her day caring for others. Detective Marcus Reynolds and his partner, Detective Aisha Johnson, were assigned to the case. They arrived at the crime scene at 8:15 p.m. By then, the market had been cordoned off, and forensic technicians were collecting evidence, blood samples, fingerprints from Tiana's car trunk, and the store's security footage. The video was crystal clear. Detective Johnson would later testify. We had faces, we had the vehicle, we had the direction they fled. In terms of identification, this wasn't going to be a difficult case. The why of it all, that was the part none of us could wrap our heads around. The detective's first stop was Denise Jackson's home, where they had to deliver the devastating news that her daughter was dead and her grandson was now motherless. Officer Johnson, a mother herself, described it as the hardest notification I've ever had to make. Ms. Jackson was holding the little boy when we arrived, Johnson recalled. He was in his pajamas, clutching the stuffed dinosaur. He kept asking when his mommy was coming with the ice cream she promised. How do you tell a 3-year-old that mommy is never coming home again? While the Jackson family began their nightmare, the 3 teenagers were just beginning their spree. ATM camera footage showed them attempting to withdraw cash using Tiana's debit card at 9:17 p.m., but they didn't have her PIN. At 10:23 p.m., they used her credit card at a gas station in Buckhead, purchasing snacks and filling the tank of her Honda. The station attendant later told police he noticed nothing unusual about the teens. They were laughing, eating chips, like kids on a joyride. Social media posts recovered from Darnell's phone showed the three at a park around midnight, taking selfies with Tiana's purse visible in the background. The caption read, "New whip, new life #levelup." They spent the night at an abandoned property owned by LaToya's parents' landscaping company, where they planned their next moves. The following morning, at approximately 11:30 a.m., the three drove to Lenox Square Mall in Buckhead, an upscale shopping district. They attempted to use Tiana's credit card at several stores, successfully purchasing nearly $2,000 worth of clothing and electronics before the card was flagged for suspicious activity. Mall security cameras captured them shopping casually, trying on sunglasses, taking more selfies in their new outfits. It was at the food court where their brief crime spree ended. A mall security guard, Harold Washington, had received an alert about Tiana's stolen Honda, which had been entered into the police database overnight. He spotted the vehicle in the parking garage and notified Atlanta PD. Officers arrived within minutes and established a perimeter. When the three teenagers exited the mall at 1:45 p.m., they were confronted by police with weapons drawn. Bodycam footage from the arresting officers shows their reactions. Darnell immediately raised his hands and began crying. LaToya froze in silence. Keisha, remarkably, asked the officers if they could stop for food on the way to the station, as they hadn't had lunch yet. The three were separated and interrogated over the next several hours. Initially, each attempted to minimize their involvement. Darnell claimed they had found the car with the keys inside. LaToya insisted she didn't know the car was stolen. Keisha admitted to the theft but denied any knowledge of a stabbing. It was only when detectives showed them the security footage from Westside Market that their stories began to unravel. Darnell broke first, sobbing as he provided a full confession. "It was Keisha's idea," he told detectives. "She's been talking about wanting to kill someone for months. She said she wanted to know what it felt like. We thought she was just talking, you know? People say crazy stuff all the time. But then she brought the knife to school last week, showed it to us in the bathroom. She said we needed to pick someone random, someone who wouldn't be connected to us." LaToya's confession came next, largely corroborating Darnell's account but attempting to distance herself from the actual stabbing. "I just went along with it," she claimed. "I was scared of what they'd think if I said no. I didn't think Keisha would really do it." Keisha Williams was the last to confess, and her interview disturbed even the veteran detectives. After being confronted with her accomplice's statements and the video evidence, she admitted to the crime with what Detective Reynolds described as chilling detachment. "We picked her because she looked nice," Keisha told detectives, her voice flat, emotionless. "Nice people don't expect bad things to happen. They're easier." When asked why she wanted to kill someone, her response was simple. "I wanted to see what it was like. On TV and movies, it looks intense. I wanted to feel that." Most disturbing was her lack of remorse. When shown a photo of Jamal and told that Tiana was a single mother, Keisha merely shrugged. "That's sad for him, I guess," she said. "But people die every day. He'll get over it." The case sent shockwaves through Atlanta and beyond. National news outlets descended on the city, running headlines like "Baby-faced killers" and "Generation Sociopath." Parents demanded answers. How could teenagers from seemingly normal backgrounds commit such a senseless act of violence? Dr. Elaine Foster, a forensic psychologist who evaluated all three teens, offered disturbing insights in her court-ordered assessment. "What we're seeing in Keisha particularly is a profound disconnect between actions and consequences," Dr. Foster explained in her report. "She exhibits classic signs of antisocial personality disorder, a lack of empathy, no remorse, and an inability to understand the permanence of death." She spoke about the murder as casually as describing a video game. When I asked if she understood that Tiana Jackson would never go home to her son, she replied, "I know that's what happens when people die. but there was no emotional comprehension behind the words. Darnell and LaToya, by contrast, showed signs of extreme distress during their evaluations. Both exhibit what I would classify as appropriate horror at what they've participated in, Dr. Foster noted. They've begun to process the reality of their actions, and that processing has manifested as severe depression, anxiety, and in Darnell's case, symptoms of PTSD. They were followers, not instigators, but that doesn't absolve them of responsibility. For Tiana's family, the horror was compounded by the ages of her killers. Her mother, Denise Jackson, now raising young Jamal, spoke at the arraignment hearing 3 weeks after the murder. "My grandson asks for his mommy every night," she said, her voice breaking as she addressed the court. "How do I tell a 3-year-old that his mother was taken by children not much older than he'll be when he starts high school? There's no sense to it. There's no way to explain it." Tiana's father, Marcus Jackson, a long-haul truck driver who had been in Tennessee when his daughter was killed, spoke of his regret at not being there to protect her. "I taught Tiana to be kind to people, to help people. That's why she was becoming a nurse. And these children took advantage of that kindness. They saw it as weakness. What kind of world are we creating where compassion makes you a target?" The case also raised difficult questions about juvenile justice. Georgia law allows for teenagers as young as 13 to be charged as adults for certain violent crimes, including murder. District Attorney Vanessa Washington announced her intention to pursue this path just days after the arrests. The brutality of this crime, the premeditation involved, and the complete lack of remorse shown particularly by the primary perpetrator leaves us no choice but to seek adult charges, Washington stated at a press conference. "Age is a factor we consider, but it cannot be the only factor. The safety of our community demands accountability." Defense attorneys immediately began building their case around the teen's youth and brain development. Keisha's lawyer, public defender Michael Greenberg, argued that adolescent brains, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for impulse control and understanding consequences, aren't fully developed until the mid-20s. "We're not suggesting Ms. Williams shouldn't face consequences," Greenberg told reporters. "But we are suggesting that the justice system needs to account for the neurological reality that teenagers are not adults. They don't think like adults, they don't process emotions like adults, and they shouldn't be punished as adults." The prosecution countered with evidence of premeditation. Text messages recovered from the teens' phones showed they had discussed killing someone for weeks. Keisha had researched knife wounds and how quickly people bleed out. They had staked out several locations before settling on West Side Market due to its good escape routes and moderate security camera coverage. This wasn't impulsive, Prosecutor Washington argued in pre-trial motions. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated, researched, and deliberately carried out. The defendant may be chronologically 15, but her actions demonstrate a cold, adult calculation. As the case moved toward trial, the media spotlight intensified. Tiana's story resonated with people across the country, a young mother working multiple jobs, pursuing education to build a better life for her son, only to be murdered for what amounted to a teenager's curiosity. A GoFundMe for Jamal's future education raised over $300,000 in less than a month. Grady Memorial Hospital established a nursing scholarship in Tiana's name. Her classmates at Atlanta Community College held a candlelight vigil where professors spoke of her determination and positive spirit. She was the student who asked questions no one else would think of. Her anatomy professor, Dr. James Chun, recalled. She wanted to understand not just how the human body worked, but how to make patients feel seen and respected even when they were at their most vulnerable. That's something you can't teach. Meanwhile, investigators continued building their case, uncovering more disturbing details about Keisha Williams' history. Former classmates came forward describing incidents of animal cruelty, a neighbor's cat that disappeared after Keisha had been seen holding it, a classroom hamster that died mysteriously during her turn to care for it over a weekend. School counselors revealed that Keisha had been referred for psychological evaluation twice in middle school after writing disturbing creative writing assignments, but her parents had declined further intervention, believing it was just a phase their daughter was going through. There were warning signs, admitted Principal Diane Rodriguez of Westlake High School. But they were subtle, easily dismissed as teenage angst or dark humor. Nothing that screamed, future violent offender. It's easy to see the pattern in hindsight, but at the time, each incident seemed isolated, explainable. The trial began 6 months later, in September 2023. Due to the extensive pretrial publicity, the judge granted a change of venue, moving proceedings to Savannah. All 3 teens were charged as adults with first-degree murder, armed robbery, and car theft. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the security footage, the murder weapon with Keisha's fingerprints, the damning text messages and social media posts, and the confessions. Store manager Raymond Davis's testimony about Keisha's smile as Tiana bled left many jurors visibly shaken. Perhaps most impactful was the medical examiner's testimony about Tiana's final moments. How the first stab wound would have been extremely painful but not immediately fatal. How she would have remained conscious for several minutes, aware she was dying, thinking of the son she would never see grow up. The victim experienced what we call the knowledge of impending death, Dr. Marcus Lee testified. It's a particularly cruel aspect of homicide cases where the victim has time to process what's happening to them. Ms. Jackson would have known she was dying. She would have felt the blood filling her lung, making each breath more difficult. She would have experienced extreme pain, fear, and most tragically, the realization that she would never see her child again. Defense attorneys attempted to argue diminished capacity due to their clients' ages, bringing in neuroscientists to testify about adolescent brain development. They presented character witnesses, teachers who spoke of Darnell's talent for mathematics, LaToya's participation in church youth group, Keisha's intelligence and artistic abilities. Keisha's parents testified that their daughter had always been different, quieter than other children, less emotionally expressive, but never violent. "We didn't see this coming," her father testified, breaking down on the stand. "We thought she was just independent, mature for her age. We never imagined she could do something like this." The teens themselves took different approaches. Darnell testified, sobbing throughout his testimony as he apologized to the Jackson family. "I should have stopped her," he repeated. "I knew it was wrong, but I was scared to speak up. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." LaToya declined to testify on the advice of her attorney. Keisha, however, chose to take the stand, a decision that her attorney later admitted was against his recommendation. Her testimony chilled the courtroom. Speaking in a calm, measured voice, she described the murder in clinical detail, explaining her curiosity about death as if discussing a science experiment. When asked if she felt remorse, she paused before answering. "I know I'm supposed to say yes," she said, "but I don't really feel anything about it. I understand it was against the law. I understand it hurt her family. But I don't feel bad about it the way everyone seems to want me to." After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants. At the sentencing hearing a week later, Judge Terrence Wilson addressed each teen individually. To Darnell and LaToya, he acknowledged their remorse but emphasized their failure to prevent the crime or report it afterward. "You had multiple opportunities to make different choices," he told them. "Your youth is a mitigating factor, but not an excuse." He sentenced each to 25 years with the possibility of parole after 15. To Keisha Williams, his words were more severe. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered such a disturbing combination of premeditation and lack of remorse," he said. "Your age has been considered, but so too must be the safety of society and the heinousness of your crime." He sentenced her to life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. As they were led from the courtroom, Tiana's father, Marcus Jackson, stood up. "I want to know why," he called out. "Why my daughter?" Keisha Williams turned, and witnesses describe her expression not as remorseful, but curious, as though the question itself was novel. She offered no answer as deputies led her away. In the aftermath of the trial, the case has sparked renewed debate about juvenile justice, mental health resources for teens, and the nature of evil itself. Are some people simply born without the capacity for empathy? Or does society create these monsters through subtle failures we've yet to fully understand? For criminologist Dr. Raymond Harris, who studied the case extensively and interviewed all 3 teens as part of his research on juvenile violent offenders, the answer lies somewhere in between. What makes the Tiana Jackson murder so disturbing isn't just its senselessness, he explained in his published analysis. It's that these teens represent a growing phenomenon we're seeing: young people who commit violence not from desperation or rage, but from a place of emotional emptiness. They wanted to feel something, anything, even if it meant taking a life. Dr. Harris points to the intersection of several troubling trends: the glamorization of violence in media, the disconnection from consequences in an increasingly digital world, and what he terms empathy atrophy, a diminished ability to understand the suffering of others. Keisha Williams isn't a traditional sociopath, he argues. She's something potentially more concerning, a product of a culture that has commodified human suffering as entertainment. She consumed thousands of hours of true crime content, serial killer documentaries, and violent gaming without developing the emotional framework to separate fantasy from reality. This perspective has proven controversial, with many arguing it absolves perpetrators of personal responsibility. Tiana's mother, Tiana Jackson, has been vocal in her rejection of such theories. "Don't tell me about brain development and media influence," she said in a CNN interview 6 months after the trial. "Millions of teenagers watch the same shows, play the same games, and don't kill innocent mothers in parking lots. Evil is evil. Some people choose it." 1 year after Tiana's death, Denise established the Tiana Jackson Foundation, which provides support to children who have lost parents to violent crime. Little Jamal, now 4, attends therapy twice weekly, working through trauma no child should endure. "Some days he's okay," Denise shared in a recent interview. "Other days he stands by the window for hours, waiting for his mom to come home." That's the true sentence these teenagers handed down: a lifetime of grief for a little boy who did nothing wrong. The foundation also advocates for better mental health screening in schools and increased resources for identifying potentially violent youth before they act. They've partnered with several Atlanta schools to implement programs teaching empathy and emotional intelligence beginning in elementary grades. "If we can save even one family from going through what we've endured," Marcus Jackson explained at the foundation's launch, "then something meaningful will have come from our daughter's death." Tiana was all about helping others. This continues her legacy. As for Keisha, Darnell, and Latoya, they remain in juvenile detention facilities until they turn 18, at which point they'll be transferred to adult prisons. Prison officials report that while Darnell and Latoya have shown signs of remorse, participating in rehabilitation programs and continuing their education, Keisha remains detached, often asking guards when she'll be allowed to start over. Her case has become a focal point for researchers studying juvenile psychopathy. Dr. Foster, who continues to evaluate Keisha every 6 months, has noted little progress in her emotional development. She understands intellectually that what she did was wrong, Foster noted in her most recent assessment. But there's still no emotional connection to that knowledge. She's learned to mimic the expected responses, to say what she thinks will advance her case for eventual release, but the fundamental disconnect remains. Keisha's parents divorced in the months following her conviction. Her mother has become an advocate for better mental health resources, speaking openly about the signs she missed and the guilt she carries. Her father has moved to another state and changed his name, seeking anonymity from the case that destroyed his family. Darnell's grandmother visits him weekly, bringing books and encouraging his studies. He's earned his GED in detention and has begun taking college courses online. In letters to the Jackson family, which they've chosen not to read, he reportedly expresses deep remorse and a desire to somehow make amends, though he acknowledges nothing can undo what happened. Latoya has turned to religion, attending every service offered at the detention facility. Her parents remain supportive, but have also established a scholarship in Tiana's name at their church, a gesture that Denise Jackson called a small step toward healing. The tragedy of Tiana Jackson forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about youth violence in America. What warning signs did we miss? Could earlier intervention have prevented this senseless death? And how do we protect society from those who kill not from passion or necessity, but from curiosity? Perhaps the most chilling aspect of this case is its ordinariness. Tiana wasn't targeted for any particular reason. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, crossing paths with teenagers who viewed her life as an experiment. As Detective Reynolds put it in his final press conference on the case, "In my 20 years on the force, I've seen all kinds of killers. The ones who scare me most aren't the ones who kill from hate or greed or jealousy. It's the ones who kill just to see what happens next." The West Side Market, where Tiana was killed, has installed a small memorial plaque near the entrance. It bears her photo, the same one from her nursing school ID, showing her bright smile and determined eyes, along with the words, "In memory of Tiana Jackson, whose kindness and compassion will never be forgotten." The store has also implemented enhanced security measures and contributes annually to the foundation bearing Tiana's name. Manager Raymond Davis, who witnessed her final moments, has become an unexpected advocate for juvenile justice reform, arguing that earlier intervention might have identified Keisha's dangerous tendencies before they turned deadly. "I see her face every night when I close my eyes," Davis admitted in a local newspaper interview. "Not Tiana's, though I see her too, but Keisha's. That smile as she watched a young mother die. I keep thinking, someone must have seen something in that girl before it came to this. Someone must have noticed something wasn't right." Tiana's apartment was eventually cleared out by her parents. Her textbooks were donated to her nursing program. Her clothes went to a women's shelter. Jamal's toys and clothes came home with Denise, along with the family photos and Tiana's nursing school acceptance letter, which Denise had framed. Jamal sleeps with his mother's sweater, which Denise has carefully preserved in a plastic bag to maintain Tiana's scent. Child psychologists have advised this may help him process his grief, though they warn that the long-term trauma of losing his mother so violently may manifest in various ways as he grows older. Children who experience this kind of traumatic loss often struggle with trust, with abandonment issues, with anger, explained Dr. Sarah Michaels, Jamal's therapist. "Our goal is to help him understand what happened in age-appropriate ways, to process his feelings safely, and to ensure he knows that what happened to his mother wasn't his fault. That's a common misconception for children, that somehow they could have prevented the tragedy." On what would have been Tiana's 25th birthday, 6 months after her death, her classmates from the nursing program gathered at her grave. They brought cupcakes, sang "Happy Birthday," and each shared a memory of how Tiana had touched their lives. They've committed to checking in on Jamal throughout his life, ensuring he knows how many people loved and respected his mother. "She would have been an amazing nurse," said her classmate Jennifer Patel. "She had that rare combination of technical skill and genuine compassion. Patients would request her specifically, even though she was just an assistant. They could tell she cared." Tiana's story has inspired legislative changes as well. Georgia State Senator Marcus Williams, no relation to Keisha, has introduced Tiana's Law, which would increase funding for mental health programs in schools and create better protocols for identifying and intervening when students show warning signs of violent tendencies. "We can't bring Tiana back," Senator Williams stated when introducing the bill, "but we can work to ensure that the next Keisha Williams is identified and helped before she picks up a knife. We can try to make sure the next Jamal doesn't lose his mother to senseless violence." The bill remains in committee, its future uncertain, in a legislature often divided on issues of mental health funding and juvenile justice. Advocates point to the Tiana Jackson case as evidence that the current system is failing. Critics argue that no system could have predicted Keisha's actions. For those who knew and loved Tiana, policy debates are secondary to their ongoing grief. Her best friend since childhood, Aisha Robinson, visits her grave weekly, often bringing fresh flowers or small trinkets that remind her of their shared history. "Some days I still pick up my phone to text her," Robinson admitted. "I'll see something funny or hear a song we used to dance to, and for a split second, I forget she's gone. Then it hits me all over again. I don't think that feeling will ever completely go away." Tiana Jackson's story reminds us that evil wears many faces. Sometimes, the face of youth itself. It forces us to question our assumptions about innocence, about the capacity for violence, about the thin line between curiosity and cruelty. As Dr. Harris noted in the conclusion of his case study, the most disturbing aspect of the Tiana Jackson murder isn't that it happened, but that it could happen again tomorrow, in any city in America. Until we better understand what transforms ordinary teenagers into killers, until we develop better methods for identifying and treating those at risk of such extreme disconnection from humanity, no one is truly safe. If you found this story impactful, please consider supporting the Tiana Jackson Foundation. Links are in the description below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Silent Crime Witness for more true crime stories that demand to be told. Remember, understanding these darkest chapters of human behavior isn't about sensationalism. It's about ensuring that victims like Tiana are never forgotten, and perhaps preventing the next tragedy before it occurs. This is Silent Crime Witness. Until next time, stay vigilant.